Hi everyone, this is Sam with Wine News in 5. Before I get going today, I'd like to ask you for a favor. If you could go to jancesrobinson.com's newly designed forum and drop examples of commonly confused wines into the thread titled Mission Blind Tasting MBT, I would greatly appreciate that. This thread will be used as a reference for a series I'm launching next month. And if you can't get to the forum because you're not a member, jancesrobinson.com does have student memberships for £49 a year. Student members receive access to the Oxford Companion to Wine, the maps from the World Atlas of Wine, the forum, and the soon-to-be-launched Mission Blind Tasting series. You'd also be supporting the continuation of the Wine News at 5. In terms of global news, today I'll discuss wildfires in Itata and Bío-Bío, flooding and landslides in New Zealand, Trump's latest tariff threat, the WHO once again asking member states to tax alcohol more harshly, protests at Moët Hennessy, new data on champagne and Prosecco sales, and an early harvest in South Africa. First up, fires in Itata and Bío-Bío. This week, reports of wildfires in Chile join those of fires still raging in South Africa, Australia, and Argentina. According to Chile's National Forest Corporation, CONAF, over 51,563 hectares have burned in Chile since the beginning of January. Nearly 70% of the land burned has been in the southern regions of Bío-Bío and Itata within the last week. As of yesterday, January 22nd, 20 people had died in the fires and more than 50,000 had been evacuated. President Gabriel Boric has declared a state of catastrophe. An article in phys.org points out that Chile has been in a state of drought for over a decade now, and that much of the land in central and southern Chile has been planted to industrial pine and eucalyptus, grown for timber and pulp. These plantations have facilitated the spread of the fires. Amanda Barnes, MW, reported vineyard damage in the communes of Ranquil and Nipas in Itata on her site, South American Wine Guide. She recommends sending donations to Fundación Desafío Levantemos Chile. On to flooding and landslides in New Zealand. New Zealand's North Island has experienced record-breaking storms in the last week, with several areas declaring January 22nd their wettest day on record. The torrential rains have caused widespread power outages, and landslides have killed at least 2 people and left several others missing. The drinks business reports that Gisborne, home to 1,226 hectares of vines, and Hawke's Bay, home to 4,574 hectares of vines, are among the worst affected areas. If you have any information on impacted wineries, please email news@jancesrobinson.com. Next, Trump's latest tariff threats. On January 13th, Donald Trump threatened 8 NATO members with escalating tariffs unless they would agree to a deal to sell Greenland to the US. The threatened tariffs were to start on February 1st and target Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the UK, the Netherlands, and Finland, with 10% tariffs until June 1st, when they would rise to 25%. Then on January 19th, Trump threatened France with 200% tariff on wine and spirits if French President Emmanuel Macron refused to join his Board of Peace for Gaza. On January 20th, Macron delivered an address to the 56th Annual World Economic Forum in Davos, saying that France and Europe would not be bullied. On January 21st, the EU halted work on the formal approval and implementation of the trade deal it reached with Trump last summer. Later that day, Trump walked back his threats on tariffs on 7 NATO members, saying that he'd formed the framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. The EU has not resumed work on formally approving the US-EU trade deal, nor has Trump dropped his threat of 200% tariffs on French wine. Meanwhile, the Kiel Institute for the World Economy released a study this week that shows that Americans pay 96% of Trump's tariffs. On to the WHO, once again asking member states to tax alcohol more harshly. On January 13th, the WHO asked governments to raise taxes on alcohol, saying that alcohol has become more affordable or remained unchanged in price in most countries since 2022, and that by increasing taxes on products like tobacco, sugary drinks, and alcohol, governments can reduce harmful consumption and unlock funds for vital health services. I'm here to tell the WHO that even if prices on alcohol globally have remained unchanged, though it certainly seems they've gone up where I am, consumption of wine has plummeted. And as the UK has demonstrated, raising duties only serves to depress sales and drive the taxes a government is able to collect lower. Furthermore, raising taxes on alcohol serves to increase pressure on community gathering places, such as restaurants and pubs, often resulting in closures and leaving people with fewer places to socialize. And I think we can all agree that socializing is a good thing. Next, protests at Moët Hennessy. In December 13th's newscast, I discussed the strike of Moët Hennessy employees because for the first time since Moët Hennessy began in 1967, the company would not be distributing a profit-sharing bonus. Profit sharing generally accounts for 15 to 30% of an employee's annual salary at Moët Hennessy houses. A wage negotiation was held on January 8th, but ended without an agreement. Workers went on strike again on January 15th. On to new data on champagne and Prosecco sales. On January 19th, the Comité Champagne reported that sales declined by 2% in volume in 2025 to 266 million bottles. This is the third consecutive year of declining sales. The same day as Comité Champagne released their latest sales numbers, Prosecco did so as well, showing a 1.1% increase in sales to 677 million bottles. Finally, an early harvest in South Africa. On January 17th, Jancis received an email from David Gass, one of our readers who lives between Paarl and Franschhoek, passing on the news that harvest in Paarl began on January 9th. While it's not unheard of for harvest to begin in mid-January, this is still very early. Gass also sent a couple rather ominous-looking photos of the smoky horizon. Here's hoping that the wine turns out well, despite the current fire pressure. That's all for this episode of the Wine News. If you enjoyed this newscast and you'd like to see it continue, please become a member of jancisrobinson.com. And if you have breaking news in your area, please email me at news@jancisrobinson.com. Thanks.